Picture a winding driveway framed by towering redwoods, their massive trunks standing like ancient sentinels under the silver glow of the moon. At the far end, nestled in the quiet expanse of Mendocino's coastal hills, stands the regal Ainsworth estate, its sandstone facade glowing against the night. Just past midnight, a gleaming black Rolls-Royce rolls to a smooth stop in front of the arched entryway, delivering the triumphant magnate, Everett Langston. He isn't alone. Gripping his arm is Juliana Marks, a radiant fashion influencer with more than a few secrets. Everett steps out, radiating self-assured swagger, ready to showcase his latest prize. But what he doesn't know is that, behind those arched wooden doors, his pregnant wife is already inside, along with two life-altering revelations. Everett Langston was born in Eugene, Oregon in the early 1980s. The youngest child of a modest family whose biggest luxury was a dusty set of Britannica encyclopedias. His parents, Martin and Evelyn Langston, both worked as librarians at the local public library. Though they lived frugally, they taught Everett that knowledge was a gateway, one that money couldn't always unlock. Everett, a wiry, bright-eyed kid with a rebellious streak, found joy in reading about ancient civilizations and daring explorations. He dreamed of photographing wild elephants in Kenya, mapping the Andes, and one day owning a grand estate that overlooked the sea. By high school, Everett's quick wit and natural charm made him a campus favorite. While he lacked athletic prowess, he shone in debate competitions and had a fiery drive to outtalk anyone who challenged him. Teachers recognized his intellect and unrelenting persistence. But underneath the polished exterior simmered a restless hunger. He craved more, always more. That endless ambition became his engine, propelling him forward with relentless pace. By the time he graduated, Everett had his eyes fixed on Wharton School of Business. With a mix of scholarships and need-based aid, he earned admission to the prestigious institution. It was there he discovered his passion for finance and market psychology. By senior year, he led a student-run investment society of over 50 members. They pooled their limited funds and dove into the unpredictable stock market. Everett had no interest in breaking even. He wanted to dominate. Relying on sleepless nights, predictive models, and obsessive chart analysis, he managed to lead the group to extraordinary returns. Whispers of his foresight and analytical edge spread quickly. After graduating, Everett landed a position at a top financial consultancy in Manhattan. Barely 22, he found himself in boardrooms with powerful investors, advisors to people like Ray Dalio and Elon Musk, scouting for untapped talent. He took every chance to learn from them. Nights were reserved for spreadsheets, candlestick patterns, and trade simulations. Days were a blur of business cards and black-tie mixers. In the decade that followed, Everett surged in the financial world. He launched Langston Equity Partners, transforming his modest earnings into tens, then hundreds of millions. Eventually, he graced the covers of elite finance publications. He became a well-known figure, invited to deliver keynote addresses at investment summits around the globe. Still, Everett's ambition knew no boundaries. He was determined to break every record and construct a personal life that matched his towering success. It was amid this meteoric rise that he met Camilla Pembroke, a woman of lineage and legacy. Camilla was a highly educated humanitarian known for her advocacy in maternal health. She exuded a soft brilliance, graceful, composed, and with a moral integrity that far exceeded Everett's relentless pursuit of achievement. Her mother, Veronica Pembroke, once belonged to a prominent philanthropic alliance associated with the late Princess Grace of Monaco, contributing to major global health initiatives. The Pembroke family had a storied ancestral residence in Cape Cod and long-standing ties to European nobility. Everett found himself drawn to Camilla's unshakable calm and the regal poise she brought to every room. Their romance began simply: unhurried walks along the Massachusetts coast, intimate dinners at refined restaurants, and thoughtful discussions about economic equity and global development. It wasn't long before Everett saw that Camilla was far more than just an elegant companion. She was his grounding force, a voice of reason when greed threatened to unmoor him. Their wedding became a media sensation, a lavish affair at the Pembroke estate, dubbed by outlets as the union of modern wealth and historic elegance. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Everett's wedding vows were deeply sincere. He pledged to cherish and protect her, to never allow his wealth to cloud the love and respect he had for her and the family they hoped to build. Yet, the quiet grip of desire and ambition sometimes transformed into something darker. Despite reaching new heights in business, Everett battled a persistent restlessness. He craved stimulation, adventure, anything to relieve the dull ache that neither Camilla's serene companionship nor his financial victories could ease. And so, the earliest signs of betrayal began to take root. Camilla had always dedicated herself to causes close to her heart, long before she ever met Everett. But marriage introduced a new complexity. She wrestled with maintaining her identity while trying to support Everett's boundless ambition. As his reputation surged, so did the spotlight, bringing endless parties, interviews, and pressure. Camilla played the part with elegance, attending high-profile galas, donning designer gowns, posing for photographs, and enduring hours of small talk about mergers and market shifts. Privately, though, Camilla was far more assertive than her press persona suggested. She had firm values. She often challenged Everett over his involvement in ethically gray ventures, questionable energy deals, profits from controversial tech expansions. Everett would brush her concerns aside with his usual charm. "It's how your foundations get funded," he'd joke. "We do well, so we can do good." Most times, Camilla would fall silent, letting the matter go. She knew Everett's business style bore little resemblance to her father's steady principles. Still, she clung to the belief that deep down, Everett was a decent man. Years into their marriage, Camilla longed for a child. At first, Everett dismissed the idea. "Let's get the firm fully stabilized first," Everett would say. "Once I hit a few more benchmarks, we'll revisit the idea of a family." Deep down, Camilla suspected Everett was uneasy about the permanence of fatherhood. He thrived on volatility, on the thrill of spontaneous flights to Dubai or Tokyo if a contract required it. But then, time didn't pause, and a sudden stroke nearly claimed Camilla's father. That brush with mortality jarred them both. It forced Everett to reconsider. Eventually, he agreed they should try for a baby. In the months that followed, Camilla discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with quiet joy. She radiated with anticipation, shifting her charitable focus more deeply into maternal wellness and child advocacy. Everett appeared pleased at first, though his response was more restrained than Camilla had hoped for. She told herself it was simply his style, composed even when life changed dramatically. During the pregnancy, Camilla sought solace at the Ainsworth estate, a countryside retreat in Northern California the couple had acquired as a weekend refuge. With pine forests and gently sloping meadows, it offered serene isolation far from the clamor of San Francisco's financial district. There, shielded from reporters and market noise, Camilla could focus on becoming a mother. Everett made weekend visits, always citing urgent midweek meetings or unavoidable obligations. As the pregnancy progressed, Camilla began to wonder if those long absences truly involved boardrooms and investor calls. Still, she buried her suspicions. She was carrying twins, two tiny heartbeats that she believed would bond her and Everett more tightly than ever. She chronicled every moment in a leather-bound journal, each emotion, each kick, every whisper of a dream, where laughter rang through the grand halls of the estate. In quiet reflection, Camilla often revisited her grandmother's stories about marriage, tales of heartbreak and resilience. Love, she believed, was tested in silence and shadow, and faith often turned storms into growth. What she didn't know was that her trial would arrive far sooner and strike with devastating force. Juliana Marks was the type of woman who turned heads the second she entered a room. With almond-shaped green eyes and long, copper-toned waves flowing past her shoulders, she exuded a magnetic presence that commanded instant attention. She had grown up in a modest neighborhood in Phoenix, Arizona. Her father was a former Air Force technician, her mother a part-time sculptor. Though money was tight, Juliana's parents always encouraged her creative spirit, be it in dance, drawing, or performing arts. By the time she was 18, Juliana had signed with a boutique modeling firm and found herself drawn to the allure of the elite. Flashing bulbs, high-end runways, haute couture gowns, all of it entranced her. She thrived on backstage exclusives and glittering VIP after-parties, effortlessly mingling with influencers, billionaires, and jet-set elite. Over time, Juliana became fluent in the art of seduction, specifically seducing power. And that allure wasn't always innocent. For Juliana, charm became a form of strategy, her currency in an unforgiving, high-stakes world. If she moved carefully, she could build the kind of financial safety net that talent alone might never earn her. Her path first crossed with Everett Langston aboard a private yacht drifting just off the Amalfi Coast. Everett was there to deliver a keynote at a premier fintech summit, while Juliana had been flown in to model for an Italian couture house. The moment Everett saw her laughing under the golden twilight, dressed in a lavish emerald gown that hugged her curves, something long dormant stirred inside him. He approached with his trademark composure. "Everett Langston, Langston Equity Partners. And may I ask who I have the good fortune of sharing this deck with?" Juliana already recognized the name. Anyone who moved in elite social circles did. She gave a sly smile. "Juliana Marks. A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Langston." With glasses of vintage champagne in hand, the two exchanged playful commentary on crypto trends and the glittery facade of the fashion industry. She was sharp. He was captivated. One conversation melted into another until the bright Italian coastline disappeared behind the hush of dusk. Everett soon found himself drawn to Juliana's magnetic, uninhibited energy, a stark contrast to Camilla's serene strength. And though Everett was undeniably married, his wedding band conspicuous under the moonlight, Juliana made no move to slow the chemistry. To her, men like Everett weren't just thrilling, they were access. Connections, upgrades. She didn't flinch at the ethical breach. In her world, infidelity was rarely seen as shocking, more like a tolerated deviation. Just before docking, tucked into a secluded corner of the upper deck, they shared a reckless kiss veiled by the warm shadows of night. Everett convinced himself it was harmless, a moment of indulgence for a man who had earned every imaginable success. Why not enjoy the sweetness life offered? But such moments rarely stay singular. Back in San Francisco, Everett began finding pretexts to see Juliana again. Business meetings, he'd claim. They both knew the truth. She became his secret plus one, at exclusive lounges, penthouse parties, and far-flung retreats disguised as client visits. He lavished her with Hermes bags, diamond bracelets, and even pulled strings to land her a more prominent campaign. For Juliana, his generosity was oxygen. The affair grew. Days blurred into weeks, then months. The thrill of forbidden romance electrified her days. Meanwhile, Everett grew addicted to the emotional escape Juliana offered, his antidote to a life that, while stable, felt increasingly colorless. He rationalized it. Camilla, after all, was absorbed with her causes. Her pregnancy. She wouldn't notice if he strayed now and then. Her pregnancy gave him the perfect excuse to justify a little release. In a reckless burst of ego and desire, Everett invited Juliana to spend a weekend at the Ainsworth estate. The decision was impulsive, an indulgence conceived from a blur of lust and entitlement. Camilla, after all, was meant to be in San Francisco that weekend for a close friend's baby shower, or so Everett believed. What he didn't know was that Camilla had canceled the trip early, too drained to engage in small talk and social pleasantries, choosing instead to unwind in the solitude of her own home. Fate, however, was preparing a brutal convergence of truths, betrayal, and confrontation that none of them could escape. Beneath the crescent moonlight, Everett's Rolls-Royce glided through the iron gates of the Ainsworth property. The sprawling estate shimmered in the dark, cloaked in quiet elegance. Towering pines stirred in the breeze, and the central fountain danced with silver reflections. Juliana leaned into Everett in the back seat, her manicured fingers tracing slow circles on his arm. She giggled softly. "I can't believe this is yours. It's like something out of a movie." "Wait until you see the inside," Everett boasted. "It'll blow your mind." He had always wanted to parade the estate in front of Juliana. To him, Ainsworth was more than real estate. It was a monument to his rise from modest beginnings. He had arranged for a late arrival, assuming the night staff would be minimal. Camilla, he was sure, wouldn't return until Monday. He imagined a weekend of unfiltered indulgence, no judgment, no guilt, no consequences. To secure discretion, Everett had messaged Mrs. Kelly, the estate's longtime housekeeper, telling her to take Sunday off. He framed it as a confidential meeting with a potential investor. Loyal and unquestioning, Mrs. Kelly complied, leaving only minimal staff on rotation. Everett also instructed them to stay clear of the main house and to only appear if summoned. Every detail was managed with theatrical precision, Everett as the headliner of his own private show. But that illusion shattered the moment the car turned into the circular drive. The estate doors flung open, and there stood Camilla, undeniably pregnant, her expression a blend of rage and disbelief. Her hand rested firmly on her stomach, the soft fabric of her seafoam maternity dress rippling in the cool breeze. The lanterns above the entrance bathed her in a pale glow, lending her an almost otherworldly power. Everett's chest tightened. A collision of shock and guilt hit him hard. Juliana, too, froze, her gaze flitting between Everett and the furious woman at the top of the steps. "Who is that?" she whispered, though her gut already knew. No one answered as the chauffeur unlatched the car door. Everett stepped out, dread coursing through his veins. It felt like stepping into judgment. Camilla's voice cracked the silence. "So it's true," she said, her tone razor-sharp. "All the late nights, the mysterious meetings. I told myself I was imagining things." Everett opened his mouth, but no words came. Camilla's face hardened, grief and fury warring in her eyes. Her gaze shifted to Juliana, who was just stepping out, her oversized sunglasses still perched on her face. For a split second, Juliana considered slipping back into the car and disappearing, but her limbs refused to cooperate. Behind the estate's polished grandeur, an emotional collapse was imminent. Inside Ainsworth's sweeping foyer, the marble floor shimmered beneath a chandelier of cascading crystal. Everett stood motionless near the main staircase. Juliana hovered several feet behind him, sharply aware that she was trespassing in a life she didn't belong to. Camilla's voice cracked through the tension, heavy with betrayal. Her words echoed off the pristine surfaces, amplifying the storm building between them. "How long has this been happening?" she demanded, eyes pinned on Everett. "How many lies have you fed me?" Juliana's eyes flicked anxiously. She cleared her throat, trying for an apology, though even she heard the emptiness in her tone. "I'm so sorry." "You didn't know?" Camilla cut her off. "Didn't know what exactly? That he had a wife? That I'm carrying his children?" Her voice was brittle, her arms tightening protectively around her belly. The pain in her eyes was unmistakable. Juliana's chest constricted as Camilla's words landed like lashes. Shame, so fierce it scorched her skin, surged through her. She wanted to say something, anything to soften the moment, to lessen the wound she had helped inflict. But the lump in her throat silenced her. She glanced down, unable to meet Camilla's gaze any longer, feeling as if the ground itself rejected her presence. Everett finally broke from his trance. "Camilla," he said, stepping forward. "This wasn't supposed to happen like this." Camilla recoiled, blinking back tears. "Don't you dare come any closer." Thunder rumbled in the distance, a low growl that felt strangely appropriate, like the sky itself mourned the betrayal happening beneath this roof. Everett scrambled internally for words, anything that could explain, repair, reverse the wreckage. But every sentence felt useless. Juliana spoke softly, trying to retreat with whatever grace she had left. "I'll just grab my things and go." She moved toward the nearest exit, hoping to vanish quietly. But Camilla wasn't finished. "So you disappear now? And what then?" she snapped. "Another secret rendezvous in some penthouse next week? Another romantic weekend in a house you both pretend is yours?" Her gaze turned toward Everett, cutting and cold. "You want to humiliate me in front of the whole world, Everett? Because trust me, the media will feast on this. There's no covering it up." The air in the foyer grew dense, pressing in from all sides. Juliana's breath came shallow, her palms cold and damp. Everett's jaw clenched as his face paled, not from guilt alone, but from the crushing realization that everything he built, everything he believed he could control, was now on the verge of implosion. Silence settled over the foyer, pierced only by the soft sound of rain beginning to tap the windows. Juliana clutched her handbag, her face pale with panic. Everett felt the full weight of the moment, the consequences crashing in, a pregnant wife, a mistress, and a public persona hanging by a thread. Then Camilla dropped. Her knees buckled as a cry of pain tore from her throat. Everett lunged to her. "Camilla!" he shouted, panic flooding his voice. Her face twisted in agony as her arms cradled her belly. Something's wrong with the babies." The sight of her doubled over in distress shoved everything else aside. Everett's instincts took over. Juliana, the affair, the shame, they all vanished from his mind. He lifted Camilla gently into his arms. "We have to get you to the hospital, now," he said, voice shaking. At Everett's command, the chauffeur immediately adjusted course to head for the nearest emergency facility. Juliana trembled, paralyzed by indecision. Should she stay or vanish unnoticed? In the end, she followed, wedging herself uneasily into the back of the Rolls-Royce, while Everett held Camilla close. The drive stretched endlessly, every second heavy with dread. Never had Everett felt so utterly ineffective. This wasn't a deal he could negotiate, nor a market he could manipulate with capital infusion or strategic timing. He was staring down the very real possibility of losing everything he'd once claimed to value, and even worse, of endangering the unborn children he had so thoughtlessly overlooked. The weight of that realization gripped him like a vice, each breath shallow, his heart pounding with a foreign rhythm. Panic. He stared blankly out the window, unable to process the blur of lights outside, only aware of the shallow gasps escaping Camilla and the faint tremor in his own hands. They reached St. Augustine Medical Center just past midnight, the harsh lights of the ER spilling across the entrance as the car rolled to a stop. The automatic doors parted, and nurses rushed out with a gurney. Camilla was swiftly wheeled away while Everett trailed behind, helpless. Inside, medical monitors blinked and IV lines were set. Everett hovered at her side, watching in silence as doctors barked orders and nurses moved with focused urgency. Every beep from the monitor struck like a warning bell, his gaze fixed on the jagged lines of her heart rate, as if memorizing them could somehow tether her to safety. He whispered prayers he never knew he believed in, each syllable a plea for mercy. Meanwhile, Juliana sat alone in the waiting area, her fingers knotted together, face drawn and pale. She looked completely out of place. A nurse passed by and asked quietly, "Are you family?" Juliana shook her head, managing only a weak smile. She sank into her seat, overcome by a bitter storm of guilt, confusion, and anger. Anger at Everett for throwing her into this humiliating spectacle, and guilt for her part in what could become a tragedy. Inside the exam room, the attending obstetrician offered tentative words. Camilla was experiencing early contractions, likely brought on by acute emotional stress. If her blood pressure didn't stabilize, the twins were at risk. The words landed like a sledgehammer on Everett's conscience. This wasn't just about infidelity or public image. This was about real life, real consequences. Tiny lives that might never see daylight if things didn't turn around. Camilla was moved to a private suite in the maternity ward. Everett sat by her bedside, gently holding her hand, trying to offer presence in the absence of answers. He murmured soft reassurances, but when he reached out, Camilla recoiled. Her gaze burned with betrayal. She was a woman who had entrusted him with everything, her love, her body, her future, and he had betrayed all three. The rejection stung more than he expected. Her eyes, once filled with adoration, now mirrored a cavern of hurt he had dug himself. His throat tightened. He wanted to cry, but couldn't. Not here. Not now. So he just sat still, enduring the ache that pressed against his ribs like a confession. The night dragged on in cold silence, punctuated only by distant intercom calls and the sterile hum of hospital machinery. Everett, once master of every scenario, found himself impotent in the face of real consequences. Across the hall, Juliana remained in the waiting area, restless. She texted a friend, "Still at the hospital. Total mess. We'll call later." She couldn't walk away, not yet. A part of her still clung to some illusion that Everett owed her closure. But as the sky paled, that illusion began to dissolve. Nurses spoke quietly nearby. Camilla was stable. The babies appeared unharmed, for now. The physical threat might have passed, but emotionally, the damage ran deep. Eventually, Everett stepped into the corridor. His face was drawn, his expression haunted. Juliana rose to meet him, her stance rigid. In the empty hallway, they spoke in low voices. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice thin with worry. "No," Everett admitted, each syllable raw. "Camilla's resting. The twins, they seem okay. But it was close." "I can't." Everett choked, the words catching in his throat. Juliana gave a small nod, eyes glistening. "I never meant for this to happen." Everett exhaled, unsteady. "Go back to the estate or check into a hotel. I'll make arrangements. but I can't leave Camilla. Juliana searched his face, desperate for any sign that what they'd shared held meaning, but all she saw was a man cracked by shame, drowning in guilt, clinging to the woman and children he had nearly lost. There was no trace of the passion, the urgency, the whispered promises that once tethered them in secrecy. That version of Everett was gone, replaced by someone raw, hollowed out, and profoundly changed. For a fleeting second, Juliana wanted to scream, to remind him of all the nights he'd held her, like she was the only truth in his world. But she knew the truth now. It had never been her world to belong to. There was nothing left to say. She gave one last nod and turned away, her heels clicking softly beneath flickering hallway lights, a quiet verdict passed by the universe. In that instant, Everett finally understood. The illusion of separation between his polished life with Camilla and his hidden affair with Juliana was gone. Every compartment had collapsed. Now, he would face the wreckage. News travels swiftly in wealthy circles. By mid-morning, Camilla's parents, Gregory and Veronica Pembroke, arrived at the hospital, radiating urgency and anger. Veronica, always poised and commanding, wasted no time confronting Everett outside Camilla's room. "You liar," she snapped, her finger stabbing his chest. "You made vows, Everett, and because of your selfishness, my daughter and her unborn children nearly died." Her voice was razor-sharp, slicing through any defense he could muster. Her eyes brimmed not with tears but with disgust, the kind that lingered long after words were spoken. Gregory, gentle and dignified, looked worn and older than Everett remembered, his grief carved into the lines on his face. "I trusted you," he said quietly, his disappointment heavier than any shout. "You were the one who asked us to wait for grandchildren until you were ready. And now, look what you've done." Everett lowered his gaze, unable to meet theirs. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "There's no excuse. Nothing I say will make this right." He wished he could unspool time, reverse every choice that led here, but remorse doesn't rewrite reality. The shame gnawed at his insides, relentless and unyielding. The words tasted like ash. Even as he said them, he knew how feeble they were against the depth of damage he had caused. Veronica scoffed. "That might be the first honest thing you've said." Though Camilla's condition had stabilized, the medical team stressed that any added emotional strain could be dangerous. After much discussion, it was decided Everett could remain in the hospital. He was still her legal spouse. But the Pembrokes made it abundantly clear they would be watching his every move. Every hour, Everett sat beside Camilla's bed. She kept her eyes on the window, her expression unreadable. Occasionally a tear would trail down her cheek. When Everett reached for her hand or murmured an apology, she would quietly pull away. The silence between them grew louder with each hour, an invisible wall fortified by heartbreak and mistrust. He wanted to tell her everything, to beg for forgiveness, but the weight of his guilt chained him to his chair. Each rejection felt like penance, one he knew he deserved. Yet he stayed, as if presence alone could mend the fractures his betrayal had carved. That evening, the Pembrokes requested a private meeting. Everett, Gregory, and Veronica gathered in a small hospital cafeteria, the sterile scent of disinfectant mixing with burnt coffee. Voices were kept low, but tension filled the space. Veronica began immediately. "Everett, we want you to stay away from Camilla until she's well. You'll pay for her medical care, obviously, but do not come near her unless she asks for you. Are we clear?" Everett's throat felt parched. "Camilla's my wife. I can't just walk away while she's in a hospital bed." Gregory's tone softened. "We're not asking you to walk away. We're asking you to give her space. Right now, your presence might be doing more harm than good." Veronica's eyes narrowed. "How many secrets have you hidden from her?" Veronica said coldly. "As far as I'm concerned, you've got a mountain of explaining to do." Gregory nodded slowly. "And maybe to a divorce attorney, too." The word divorce hit Everett like a blade to the ribs. He'd never truly believed Camilla might leave him, let alone take the children with her. The thought carved open a pit of panic inside him. In that moment, Everett recognized just how fragile everything he'd built was. Losing Camilla didn't just mean losing the image of a picture-perfect marriage. It meant losing the moral weight that had anchored his place in high society. Without Camilla, Everett Langston was nothing more than another opportunistic, ethically questionable mogul, void of any human depth, absent of the family that lent him legitimacy. "Please," he said quietly, voice hoarse. "Don't talk about divorce. Let me try to fix this. I'll do whatever it takes to earn her trust again." Veronica let out a sharp breath. "That's not our call. It's up to Camilla. If she asks to see you, fine. If not, you stay away." Everett nodded, too hollowed out to push back. Right now, only one thing mattered: Camilla's recovery and the well-being of their unborn children. He was finally beginning to grasp the scope of the destruction he had caused. If there was any chance of even earning back Camilla's tolerance, let alone her love, it would require a long, grueling road of repentance, if that door hadn't already shut forever. The weekend blurred past. Camilla's condition improved steadily, though her silence still carried wounds far deeper than any chart could track. Everett honored Veronica's warning, showing up only when Camilla granted permission. He spent nights alone at a nearby penthouse hotel suite, canceling meetings and postponing all travel. His world had constricted to a few square blocks around the hospital. Juliana Marks, meanwhile, faded into the background. Everett had quietly arranged for her to stay at the Ritz-Carlton under his name, footing every expense without a word. Their communication dwindled to short text messages. Juliana was furious to be pushed aside, but she knew better than to resist. As his personal life unraveled, cracks began to show in his professional empire. Word spread quickly through financial circles that Everett Langston might be stepping back from Langston Equity Partners due to family issues. Nervous board members, already edgy over market instability, began whispering doubts about his leadership. A few clients even hinted they'd pull their portfolios unless Everett personally stayed involved. Then came the unexpected. A young reporter, Rachel Allerton, from a leading financial magazine, intercepted Everett in the hospital lobby. She had the unmistakable gleam of a journalist chasing a breaking story. "Mr. Langston," she said, polite but firm, already pressing record on her phone. "I realize this is a difficult time, but there are rumors of personal challenges impacting your firm. Do you have any comment?" Everett summoned a practiced smile. "I don't discuss personal matters with the press, Miss Allerton. My family is my focus right now. Langston Equity Partners remains fully operational." Everett's tone was clipped. Rachel pressed on. "Is there any truth to the rumor that an extramarital affair contributed to your wife's hospitalization?" His jaw tensed. No comment. A nearby security officer stepped in, quietly directing Rachel away. As she disappeared down the corridor, Everett's heart sank. No matter how hard he tried to contain the scandal, it was slipping through the cracks. Soon, he learned that paparazzi shots of him and Juliana aboard the Amalfi yacht had begun circulating online, sparking intense speculation. But the worst part wasn't the headlines. It was knowing Camilla's pain was now media spectacle. Back at the Ainsworth estate, Camilla returned to recover under careful medical watch. Her parents remained close, overseeing her care. Still, she managed to steal a few quiet hours for herself. One afternoon, she wandered into a rarely used drawing room lined with portraits of past generations. She settled into a deep velvet armchair, a cup of chamomile tea warming her hands. Her thoughts circled the events of the past week: the confrontation, the hospital, the searing betrayal. Memories of Everett's once affectionate gestures surfaced, like the evening he proposed on a secluded Croatian island, walking with her under moonlight and promising a life filled with magic and meaning. Now, those cherished moments were tainted. She wondered how blind she had been. The late-night calls, the unfamiliar cologne, the random absences and vague excuses. Maybe she should have questioned him more. Maybe she should have demanded more attention to their marriage. But dwelling on regrets wouldn't rewrite the present. Resolute, Camilla pressed a palm gently against her belly. The twins shifted softly inside her, a reminder of what truly mattered. She whispered, "We'll be fine. With or without him, we'll be just fine." In the midst of heartbreak, Camilla found clarity. She wasn't powerless. She had the strength of motherhood and her own dignity. Everett had crossed a line, and if he thought he could move in and out of their lives at his convenience, he was gravely mistaken. At the Ritz-Carlton, Juliana Marks quickly discovered that luxury could become a gilded cage. The fluffy robes and room service dulled under the weight of scandal. She felt trapped, feeding on sporadic texts from Everett. "We'll talk soon," or "Need time with the family." Weeks ago, those messages might have reassured her. Now they felt like brush-offs. She was tired of being the forgotten piece in Everett's unraveling puzzle. One night, frustrated and restless, Juliana reached out to an old friend in the city, a savvy PR consultant named Morgan Vale. Over cocktails at a chic lounge, Juliana unloaded her thoughts: the betrayal, the public mess, and her growing sense of abandonment. Morgan listened carefully, sipping her martini, nodding now and then with practiced empathy. "You're so focused on Everett's image," Morgan noted, arching an eyebrow. "But what about yours? This scandal could cost you your modeling contracts. Or," she leaned in, "you could flip it in your favor if you play it smart." Juliana stiffened. She hadn't set out to become tabloid bait, but Morgan's suggestion lingered in her thoughts. Was there a way to protect herself? Maybe even elevate her standing in the aftermath of this disaster? Days later, Morgan arranged a discreet meeting with Kevin Shaw, a hungry tabloid reporter, offering a hefty sum for an exclusive tell-all from the other woman. Juliana hesitated. Would she really risk Everett's wrath by selling their story? But the longer he ignored her calls, the more anxious she became about her career, her image, her future. Then came the final blow, a cold, clipped message from Everett. "Can't talk. Please stop reaching out." That was it. Juliana snapped. She'd spent years mastering the art of capitalizing on moments. Why should Everett Langston walk away unscathed, salvaging his marriage and public standing, while she faded into scandal's shadow? So she met Kevin Shaw at an upscale rooftop bar, her face half hidden beneath dark sunglasses and a silk scarf. She demanded a significant payout for any information. Kevin, practically trembling with anticipation, agreed. Over the course of several drinks, Juliana detailed everything: how they met on the Amalfi Coast, the cryptic texts, the expensive gifts, the intimate weekend getaways. She was careful, though, keeping the confrontation at the Ainsworth estate vague. Some parts, she knew, were too volatile to expose completely. When she finally left, a strange calm washed over her. The story would break soon. Everett would feel the sting, but she'd protected herself. If he wasn't going to fulfill his silent promises, if he was going to retreat into Camilla's arms and shut Juliana out, then she would reshape the story. In a world where status and narrative were currency, public sympathy could be a weapon. And maybe, just maybe, Juliana wouldn't emerge as the pitied mistress, but as a sharp, resourceful survivor. A week later, tabloids exploded with headlines. Exclusive: model Juliana Marks opens up about affair with Everett Langston. The public devoured every word. Photos of Juliana on the yacht, leaving Everett's penthouse, and walking near the Ainsworth estate flooded social media. Talk shows debated the morality of rich men believing they could have it all. Finance pundits speculated on whether Langston Equity Partners might face client defections. Everett awoke to a torrent of frantic calls from partners, attorneys, and close associates. Rage surged through him at Juliana's betrayal. He drafted message after message, each one sharper than the last, filled with fury and accusation. But he never sent any. Escalation could trigger even more exposure. Instead, he pivoted to crisis control, an emergency meeting with his legal team to explore defamation options. A carefully crafted statement asserting that personal matters had no bearing on Langston Equity's core mission, and relentless calls to key investors to assure them he was still fully in command. The hours blurred into each other. His voice hoarse from reassurances, his body running on adrenaline and shame. Each conversation, each corporate platitude felt like a hollow echo. Behind every sentence, his mind circled back to Camilla, her silence, her eyes. The press could damage his company, but it was her judgment he feared most. Yet, beneath the corporate armor, his personal world lay in ruins. Camilla, meanwhile, read the headlines with a mix of revulsion and grief. She already knew enough, from Everett's confession and the murmurs among household staff, but seeing Juliana's smug face plastered on magazine covers made everything unbearably real. Her parents tried to buffer her from the media deluge, but it was everywhere. Each image, each headline was a fresh wound, reopening pain that had barely begun to scab over. One morning, Camilla turned sharply to Veronica. "No more," she said. "I don't want to hear about that woman again. This is my life, my marriage. I'll decide how to deal with it." Her voice was fierce, but her hands trembled, a quiet testament to the storm still raging inside her. She wanted to scream, to erase every trace of Everett from her life, Yet something deeper, more complicated, held her in place. But beneath her anger, Camilla felt something she hadn't expected, a flicker of relief. The truth was no longer buried. Everett's betrayal was out in the open, raw and visible. Sometimes brutal honesty, especially when unwillingly exposed, can clear the fog for either healing or closure. A few days into the firestorm, Everett arranged a private conversation with Camilla at the Ainsworth estate. She was resting in the sunroom, a knit blanket draped over her, the amber light of late afternoon cascading through tall windows. Though still vulnerable, her pregnancy had stabilized. A nurse moved quietly nearby. Everett sat down across from her, hands folded. He looked thinner, his face drawn with regret. The air between them was taut with unsaid words, a quiet battlefield of memories and regret. "Camilla," he said, his voice unsteady, "I know I can't undo what I've done, but I want you to know I'm here. I'll do anything it takes." Camilla studied him, composed yet unreadable. "You can't unbreak a heart, Everett," she replied. "All you can do is see what can grow from what's left." Everett swallowed hard. He thought of the woman he had once promised the world. The idea of losing her and their children stripped away the last of his pride. He had faced boardrooms full of billionaires, hostile acquisitions, courtroom showdowns. None of them had reduced him like this. "I'm committed to counseling, to whatever you need. You and the twins come first. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want to try." Camilla exhaled. "I don't have an answer right now. I need time. I need to know what's best for me and for the babies. No more scandals. No more secrets. Can you at least give me that?" "Yes," Everett whispered, tears forming. "I promise." Camilla nodded slowly. "Then give me space. Give us what we need. And maybe, just maybe, we'll see if there's anything left of this marriage worth saving." Everett stood, quiet. Feeling a faint flicker of hope, Everett leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to Camilla's forehead. She didn't move away, but she didn't respond either. He stepped back with quiet reverence in his chest, uncertain if redemption was truly possible, but resolved to try. The following months became a crucible for everyone. Camilla remained at the Ainsworth estate, surrounded by private nurses and her parents. She threw herself into preparing for the twins, reading every parenting guide she could find, organizing the nursery, and working closely with a therapist recommended by her obstetrician. Though deeply wounded, she recognized that if Everett could change, her children deserved a present and reliable father. But she was no longer the passive partner of years past. Quietly, she consulted divorce attorneys, not to initiate proceedings, but to understand her rights and establish clear boundaries. Everett began a personal journey of atonement, not through press conferences, but through quiet, deliberate action. He reached out to key allies in the business world, explaining that he was navigating personal turmoil, but remained fully committed to Langston equity. In a gesture both contrite and sincere, he donated a large sum to maternal health initiatives, a cause close to Camilla's heart. Perhaps most significantly, Everett started private therapy. The counselor, a step relative of an old friend, didn't coddle him. Their sessions forced Everett to confront the reckless choices that had shaped his adulthood. They unpacked his need for validation, his fixation on financial dominance, and the deep-rooted fear of being ordinary. He began to grasp how the very ambition that built his empire had also hollowed out his personal life. Juliana, meanwhile, found herself thrust into the paradox of fame and infamy. Some PR firms reached out with opportunities to monetize her sudden notoriety, but high-profile brands viewed her as toxic. Leaning into the attention, she launched a line of low-tier cosmetics marketed aggressively online. Certain tabloids praised her for bravely exposing a billionaire, but society's elite saw her as little more than a social climber. Nights in her sleek new penthouse, an extravagant farewell gift from a short-lived relationship with another wealthy figure, were often spent in introspection. Had she gained anything from this affair? Or had she simply exchanged her integrity for fleeting relevance? As for the public, their appetite for scandal soon shifted. The Langston affair faded as a newer, shinier controversy gripped the headlines. Everett Langston and Camilla Pembroke became yesterday's drama. But the financial world had a longer memory. Every business move Everett made from then on was met with a layer of skepticism he hadn't faced before. Some of Everett's more aggressive investors began to pull back, no longer seeing him as bulletproof. He moved cautiously, navigating to protect his firm's equilibrium while walking a tightrope in his personal life. The tension in boardrooms was nothing compared to the silence in the halls of Ainsworth. Behind closed doors, the man once known for shrewdness and certainty now lived in measured humility, each day tethered to hope and hesitation. On a crisp December night, several months after the scandal had first exploded, Camilla went into labor. Staff at the Ainsworth estate sprang into action, calling the physician, arranging hospital transport. Everett, in Manhattan finalizing a critical deal, got the call and didn't hesitate. He immediately dropped everything. His emergency use helicopter was ready, and this was the moment it had always been meant for. Within an hour, Everett arrived at the hospital, breathless and rattled. Camilla was already in the delivery room, her face strained in pain, Gregory and Veronica flanking her. As Everett entered, Camilla caught sight of him. A fleeting expression of relief crossed her features, just before another contraction overtook her. During the long and agonizing hours that followed, Everett never left her side. He gripped her hand, whispering steady encouragement, reminding her how brave she was, how close they were to meeting their children. If Camilla harbored any remnants of resentment, they were eclipsed by the overwhelming labor of birth. Every cry, every breath, every tightening of her hand in his made him feel both helpless and more present than he'd ever been. At exactly 2:14 a.m., their first child, a baby boy, entered the world, limbs flailing and lungs strong with his cry. The doctor smiled. "He's perfectly healthy," she said, laying him gently on Camilla's chest. A minute later, his twin sister followed, smaller but just as loud in her arrival. Everett couldn't contain the tears. He kissed Camilla's forehead, overwhelmed by gratitude, regret, and awe. Camilla looked at him then, eyes wet, and gave him a quiet nod. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a moment of shared wonder, of life binding them together. In the weeks that followed, a delicate routine took shape at the estate. Camilla allowed Everett to stay in a guest suite. He stepped away from Langston Equity to focus fully on his role as a father. Midnight feedings, lullabies, diaper changes. He did it all. Their relationship was still fractured, but caring for the twins became a bridge between them. The quiet hours, rocking Benjamin while Camilla nursed Lila, became sacred. Words were still rare, but cooperation came naturally, almost rhythmically. They named the babies Benjamin and Lila, names that soon filled every room with warmth. For Everett, cradling his children gave him a deeper sense of purpose than any profit margin ever had. Sometimes Camilla would watch him quietly, a trace of astonishment flickering in her gaze. Other nights, tension still hovered, especially when old wounds rose to the surface. But the children were a balm, a daily reminder of why they had to keep trying. Their cries and coos stitched together the torn fabric of a fragile peace, one sleepless night at a time. Camilla's parents remained involved for a while, offering help and guidance, but eventually they returned to their own estate. Camilla was stronger now, and everyone saw it. Soon quiet negotiations began between legal teams, discussions of trusts for the twins, possible separation, property allocations. Camilla wasn't ready to decide. She needed more than gestures. She needed to know Everett's change ran deep. At times, Everett felt himself fraying. He craved resolution. He wanted Camilla to say they had a future together. But every time that longing for resolution swelled inside him, Everett reminded himself, trust, once broken, could not be repaired overnight. He made a conscious effort to give Camilla the space she needed, proving through quiet, steady actions that he could become the partner and father she and their children deserved. Life settled into a fragile rhythm. Midnight bottle feedings beneath high coffered ceilings, soft baby laughter at dawn, tentative conversations during quiet afternoons. Everett learned that fatherhood wasn't a title. It was a complete transformation. And Camilla, despite the pain she still carried, found brief peace in watching Everett hold their children. He sang lullabies in a hesitant, low voice she'd never heard from him before. As winter thawed into spring, new life emerged at the Ainsworth estate. Budding branches let golden sunlight pour through, and the old fountain sparkled under warmer skies. Benjamin and Lila turned 3 months old. Their personalities began to take shape. Benjamin a restless bundle of motion, Lila more observant and serene, always watching with wide, questioning eyes. One quiet afternoon, after settling the twins for a nap, Camilla and Everett found themselves alone in the estate's reading room. Soft light bathed the shelves of old books, and for the first time in weeks, no interruptions called them away. Camilla studied Everett for a long moment. "I've seen a change in you," she said quietly. His chest tightened. "I've never been more serious about anything. These last few months, with the twins, with you, have made me realize what truly matters." She looked down, blinking back tears. "I don't fully trust you," she admitted, voice unsteady. "But I see you trying, and I care that our children have a real family." Everett reached across the space between them. This time, she let him take her hand, though her grasp was tentative. "I love you," he said softly. "I always have, even if I didn't know how to show it the right way." Camilla closed her eyes, letting silent tears fall. In that fragile moment, she allowed herself to admit, beneath the pain, love still lingered. It wasn't clean. It wasn't easy. Love never was. But maybe it was still something worth salvaging. There was no instant redemption, no grand declaration of reconciliation, just a trembling, heartfelt embrace. Maybe it was the beginning of something new, or maybe it was a graceful goodbye. But for now, it was enough. Soon, they began couples counseling, long sessions filled with confessions, trust-building, and unfiltered honesty. Everett even wrote Camilla a letter, confessing to each deception and vow he'd broken. She read it with trembling hands, then replied with her own letter, sharing her pain, her fears, her lingering doubts. The road ahead was still uncertain. But for the sake of Benjamin and Lila, and for the sake of their own healing, they chose to keep walking it, side by side, changed but not broken. Time passed, slowly mending old wounds. The scars would remain, but so would the resolve. Everett and Camilla chose to remain at the Ainsworth estate, reshaping it into a haven instead of a reminder of heartbreak. The household staff treated Everett with polite distance, aware of the past but also observant of his sincere dedication to parenting. Juliana slowly faded into the background. She launched a modest cosmetics line online, briefly benefiting from her fleeting moment in the tabloids, but her name gradually vanished from major media. Everett never contacted her, and she, recognizing there was no longer anything to gain, moved on. Whispers later tied her to an international art dealer, though the rumor barely registered in the press. The news cycle turned, and fresh scandals took center stage. Meanwhile, Everett's public image stabilized. He showed steady leadership at Langston Equity and continued supporting charitable causes, many of which reflected Camilla's values. Skeptics dismissed it as image management, but those close to him sensed a deeper shift. Fatherhood and the near loss of his family had left a lasting impression. Camilla, ever watchful, allowed Everett back into her room, but under strict conditions. Transparency became non-negotiable. She required open access to his financial records, call logs, and calendar. Some nights Everett lay awake, wrestling with guilt over how effortlessly he once deceived. Now, every honest day felt like progress. Each morning, he rose early to check on Benjamin and Lila. He found comfort in their soft breathing, their tiny frames cocooned in warmth. As he stood in the quiet, Everett would whisper his regrets to the dark and vow to be a better man, for them, for her. Exactly 1 year after Everett had returned to Ainsworth Estate with Juliana by his side, Camilla awoke before dawn. She looked over at Everett, asleep beside her, his features relaxed, his hair tousled by sleep. Slipping from the room, she made her way to the nursery. Sunlight painted the room in gold. Benjamin looked up with wide eyes, Lila cooed gently. Camilla gathered both into her arms, one perched on each hip, and felt an overwhelming surge of gratitude. A few minutes later, Everett appeared, rubbing his eyes. "Morning," he whispered, kissing each baby on the forehead. He turned to Camilla, watching her closely, searching for any sign of what she felt. She met his gaze with a faint but warm smile. The heaviness that once filled every room between them had softened into quiet resolution. They walked together to the breakfast table, where the staff had laid out fruit, toast, and coffee. As Camilla fed the twins, she cleared her throat. "I have something to say," she announced. Everett looked up, alert. "I'm ready to give us a real chance." "No more guests," Camilla said softly. "No more half measures. But Everett, if you ever betray me again, we're done. That's it." Everett felt the breath leave his lungs, a wave of relief breaking over him. "I won't," he said quietly. "I promise." He reached across the table and gently took her hand. Their eyes met, and in that moment, no more words were needed. Months of therapy, candid conversations, and an unwavering commitment to their children had brought them to this point. Wounded, but still together. Rebuilding had been slow, each day a quiet test of Everett's sincerity and Camilla's willingness to trust again. But in this instant, they chose hope over bitterness, a shared future over a broken past. From the edge of collapse to the fragile but real beginnings of renewal, their journey stood as proof that even after betrayal and humiliation, a life can still be rebuilt. Through endless baby cries, sleepless nights, and emotionally raw days, they discovered a deeper love, a bond forged not in perfection, but in persistence. Second chances aren't promised, but with honesty and perseverance, they can thrive. If their story moved you, if it made you consider the power of redemption, the pull of desire, or the strength of family, please share it. Like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more true-to-life stories that explore the dramatic twists and quiet triumphs of real relationships. Because every life holds a chapter that could help someone else begin their own healing. They say every marriage hides its secrets, some small enough to ignore, others so large they can shatter everything. But what happens when the secret is exposed under the harshest spotlight of all? At a high-end restaurant, in front of dozens of unknowing eyes? What if, in that exact moment, a wife realizes her husband has betrayed her, and she's carrying his child? The next story takes us into the fast-paced rise and explosive downfall of Graham Lockhart, a man whose world unraveled in one evening of revelations, scandal, and soul-searching. Graham Lockhart had always walked with a swagger that flirted with arrogance. He was the type who captured attention in every room, tall, polished, with eyes that made you feel like he already knew your secrets. At 37, he was already at the helm of one of the most rapidly growing private tech investment firms in the country, Lockhart Dynamics, headquartered in the heart of New York City. Whispers in the industry compared him to Elon Musk, or claimed he aimed to outpace Bill Gates in philanthropic endeavors. While most of these comparisons were media exaggerations, Graham soaked them in, feeding his relentless ambition. He'd grown up in a modest household in Albany, New York, the son of a public librarian and a laid-off electrician. From a young age, Graham swore he'd never again taste the instability of financial struggle. If there was a summit, he would scale it. If a rival stood in his way, he would either surpass them or buy them out entirely. His first major win came with a startup acquisition that earned him a cool $20 million by age 26. From that moment, he became addicted to the adrenaline of high-stakes business. His wife, Cameron Lockhart, was the unwavering foundation behind him. Formerly Cameron Whitmore, she came from a vastly different world, an only child raised in Greenwich, Connecticut, by a close-knit and affluent family. Her father, Douglas Whitmore, owned a boutique real estate firm that catered exclusively to high-net-worth clientele. Cameron possessed an innate poise that Graham lacked. While he dominated pitch decks and investor summits, he often struggled with the refined nuances of elite social gatherings. Cameron became his silent tutor, guiding him through the polished world of the ultra-wealthy with composure and sophistication. For 6 years, their marriage had been a delicate balance of love, shared aspirations, and bouts of tension, especially as Graham increasingly devoted himself to Lockhart Dynamics. Cameron had longed for a child, a family. Graham always responded, soon, pushing it further down his list of goals. Then, finally, to Cameron's overwhelming joy, she became pregnant. Graham appeared thrilled at first, though more often than not he stumbled in past midnight, exhausted, citing client meetings and high-pressure strategy sessions. Still, Cameron believed in him. She believed in his vision, in his ability to provide not only for her, but for their soon-to-arrive child. Even if the passion had faded into routine, she trusted Graham would safeguard their family. She had clung to that trust like a lifeline, telling herself his long hours and late nights were for them, for their future. She had no inkling that her entire world was about to shift because of one seemingly harmless decision to meet an old friend for dinner in the heart of Manhattan. Cameron hadn't originally planned to be at the upscale restaurant Le Jardin on that particular night. At 8 months pregnant, she was more exhausted than usual. But her college friend, Olivia Bennett, was passing through New York for the first time in years and had insisted they meet. To Cameron, it felt like a gift, a welcome break from waiting alone at home, wondering when Graham might come through the door. Olivia had chosen Le Jardin after seeing it featured in a luxury lifestyle magazine. The interior shimmered with crystal chandeliers, and each table was discreetly tucked behind softly illuminated partitions. The atmosphere was refined, the ambient murmur of low conversation punctuated only by the gentle clinking of fine china. Cameron took it all in with cautious appreciation, her hand instinctively cradling her belly as if shielding the unborn from any unease that lingered in the air. Cameron arrived early and paused briefly at the hostess stand, steadying herself with one hand. And a kind-eyed staff member quickly escorted her to a plush velvet seat and brought her a glass of water. Though she felt slightly out of place in her maternity dress amid the sea of sleek cocktail attire, Cameron reminded herself she wasn't there to impress anyone. She was there to see her friend. Still, a quiet longing crept in. She wished, just for a second, that Graham were beside her, that they were just another couple enjoying a night out, laughing, dreaming, connected. While waiting, she decided to freshen up in the restroom. On her return, something behind a semi-translucent partition caught her eye. She didn't understand why her gaze lingered at first. She could make out a man's silhouette, tall, composed, and seated across from him, a woman with long, dark hair. A twinge of unease prickled Cameron's spine. The man's posture, the subtle tilt of his head, the gesture of his hand, it was unmistakably Graham's. It couldn't be. Graham had told her he was in an urgent meeting across town. Her heart began to thud in her chest. Cameron crept closer, staying shielded behind a velvet curtain that separated the main dining room from the private alcoves. A waiter passed and she turned, pretending to admire a painting until he moved on. Then, cautiously, she peered again. Yes, it was Graham. He wore a deep gray suit, one she knew he reserved for special occasions, not casual business. And his dining companion wasn't a colleague. She exuded a commanding beauty and elegance. Cameron didn't recognize her. At first, she thought it might be a high-profile client. But then she saw the woman's fingers extend across the table and rest lightly on Graham's hand, far too intimate a gesture for a business dinner. Cameron's stomach clenched. She felt lightheaded. A fierce impulse to march into the alcove surged through her, but something stronger, a deep-rooted need for clarity, kept her still. She wasn't ready to explode, not yet. Instead, she stood frozen, grief coiling tightly around her ribs. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the confirmation that the distance she'd been sensing for months wasn't imagined. It was real. And it was sitting 3 tables away, wearing red lipstick and touching her husband. A heavy stillness anchored her to the floor, her breath catching as the magnitude of what she was witnessing began to solidify into betrayal. They chuckled softly, and Graham gently tucked a loose strand of the woman's hair behind her ear. Cameron's hands trembled, tears welling in her eyes. She leaned against the wall for support, gasping for air. She had to get out, get away. She spun around and stumbled down the corridor, nearly colliding with the surprised Olivia, just arriving. Olivia took one look at Cameron's ashen face, then glanced toward the private alcove. "Cameron, are you okay?" she asked, gripping her friend's arms gently. "You look like you've seen a ghost." In a hoarse voice, Cameron whispered, "I don't feel well, Liv. Can we go somewhere else?" Olivia, ever empathetic, didn't press. She guided Cameron outside, hailed a cab, and insisted they return to Cameron's penthouse so she could rest. Cameron muttered something about not wanting to be alone, about needing to talk. Once in the taxi, she broke down and told Olivia everything, that she had just seen Graham with another woman, unmistakably intimate, and not some passing client. Olivia's face hardened with fury. "You need to confront him," she said firmly. "You can't let him get away with this, not when you're about to have his child." But Cameron felt numb, her thoughts tangled with shock and disbelief. A part of her wanted to pretend it hadn't happened. Yet the image of Graham caressing Juliana Y's hair burned in her memory. By the time they reached the penthouse, Cameron had made a decision. She would wait. Graham would have to come home eventually, and when he did, She would demand the truth, face to face. The night dragged on with excruciating slowness. Olivia offered to stay, but Cameron declined. She needed to face her husband alone. As Olivia left with firm instructions to call at any hour, Cameron remained alone in the vast apartment. The baby shifted within her, as if responding to her inner turmoil. Near midnight, she dozed off on the couch, still in her maternity dress, phone clutched in her hand. The sound of the front door unlocking startled her awake. Graham stepped inside, his laptop bag slung over one shoulder, his tie loosened. He froze when he saw her in the dim glow of the lamp. "You're still up?" he asked, approaching and leaning in to kiss her forehead. His breath carried the trace of wine. Cameron flinched, the memory of his betrayal igniting her pain all over again. Her voice cracked, loaded with anguish. "Where were you?" Graham stopped cold, clearly taken aback by her tone. "I told you, I had a meeting." "Don't lie to me," Cameron snapped. "I saw you, Graham. I saw you at Le Jardin with that woman, Juliana Y. You touched her hair." She could barely finish the sentence, her voice breaking into tears. Graham's face drained of color, then stiffened with defiance. "Were you spying on me? What were you doing there? Having dinner with a friend?" she shot back. "But that's not the point. Don't twist this. Just tell me the truth." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "She's just a client. Nothing more." That gesture was friendly. These international investors, they expect warmth, familiarity. She's considering a major stake in Ashcroft Equity. Cameron stared at him, her heart fracturing. "Don't insult me, Graham. I know what I saw." "That wasn't some casual business dinner," Cameron said, her voice low and trembling. Graham exhaled slowly, pressing his lips together. "Okay, we're close," he admitted, "but it's complicated. Juliana has ties to some major investors in Southeast Asia. She expects a certain rapport. If I don't keep her engaged, we could lose a multi-million-dollar partnership." "So you're sleeping with her to secure a deal?" Cameron's voice cracked, a volatile mix of hurt and fury. "It's not that simple," Graham replied, though he didn't deny it. "This is business, Cameron. It's not what you think. Yes, she's forward. Maybe I let it go too far, but it's for the company, for our future." Cameron stood abruptly, fury fueling her strength despite her late pregnancy. "Our future? Our child's future? And this is how you protect it? By betraying me?" Graham's eyes briefly filled with guilt, but then his expression steeled. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Ashcroft Equity is on the edge of something monumental. One major investment could put us alongside the top-tier firms. I can't let personal complications derail that." Cameron felt as if her entire world had slipped out from under her. She had always known Graham's ambition bordered on obsessive. But this admission that he'd compromised their marriage for a deal, it stole the breath from her lungs. A crushing wave of exhaustion and heartbreak descended. "Get out," she whispered, her voice fragile but unwavering. "Cameron," Graham began, but she turned away, cutting him off. "Sleep in the guest room. I can't even look at you." He opened his mouth, but the words never came. He turned and left the room silently. Cameron collapsed back onto the couch, tears soaking her cheeks. Her baby kicked within her, as if echoing her anguish. One question repeated in her mind, like a broken clock. How could he do this to us? Morning light streamed through the penthouse's vast windows, nudging Cameron from her restless sleep. She sat up, aching from the unforgiving couch cushions. Part of her still hoped Graham would appear, maybe to offer an apology, or something better than, "It's for the deal." But the apartment was quiet. She checked the guest room, empty. He was gone. No note, no text, just the lingering trace of his cologne in the hallway. A slow-burning bitterness rose in her chest. Had he really left like nothing happened? Trying to hold herself together, she fed their gray cat Murphy, who purred anxiously around her legs. She brewed tea, stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, and watched the skyline shimmer under the sun, but none of it calmed her. Her phone buzzed. A message from Olivia. "I'm here for you." Cameron typed a quick thanks, then froze mid-step. On the TV screen, a headline scrolled across the ticker. The anchor's voice cut into the room like a knife. An ongoing investigation into insider trading and financial misconduct at Ashcroft Equity is gaining traction. CEO Graham Langston has yet to comment. Sources say the SEC has initiated preliminary inquiries. Cameron's hands shook as she grabbed the remote and turned up the volume. Her heart thundered. Investigation? Insider trading? This was the first she had heard of anything official. The anchor continued. Ashcroft equity rose rapidly to prominence in recent years, with some comparing Graham Langston to tech titans like Elon Musk and Bill Gates. But today, federal regulators are questioning whether select investment gains were based on illegally obtained data. CEO Graham Langston was reportedly seen dining last night with an unidentified associate, fueling speculation that this meeting may be tied to the alleged misconduct. Cameron felt a strange blend of shock and vindication. Her mind returned to the quiet intimacy of the Oaksvale restaurant, Graham's hushed voice, and the woman, Juliana Chen. Was that dinner more than just a betrayal of marriage? Was it a step in a broader scheme? She snatched up her phone and scrolled through financial news feeds. Headlines screamed across every major outlet. Ashcroft equity under scrutiny, insider probe engulfs Langston's empire, and whispers of hush money surround Langston meeting. Nothing directly tied Juliana to the allegations, only whispers that Graham was seen with someone rumored to be central to the investigation. Anxiety twisted through Cameron's stomach. This was no longer just about infidelity. It was a full-blown legal crisis. She called Graham's cell, straight to voicemail. Next, she tried his executive assistant, the always punctual Nina Ko, but even Nina didn't answer. The ringing eventually dumped into voicemail. Cameron's heartbreak took a back seat to urgency. She needed answers. Now. Throwing on a coat, she left the penthouse and headed straight to Ashcroft Equity's headquarters in Midtown. The company's operations occupied the 19th to 21st floors of a sleek steel and glass skyscraper. But today, the typically vibrant lobby was blanketed in a heavy, nervous silence. Clusters of staff murmured, their eyes flitting toward groups of suited officials combing through paperwork and laptops. On the 21st floor, where Graham's corner office loomed above the city, Cameron stepped out of the elevator and was met by a flurry of investigators. She approached a man flipping through documents. "I'm Cameron Langston. I need to speak with my husband." The man barely looked up. "Do you have an appointment?" "Appointment?" Cameron almost scoffed. "I'm his wife. Is he here?" He motioned toward a shut door. "He's in a meeting with SEC attorneys and legal counsel. You'll need to wait." "I'm not waiting," she snapped. Ignoring the murmurs behind her, Cameron strode toward the door and tried the handle. Locked. She knocked. Sharp and deliberate. A moment passed before the door opened, revealing Graham's lead counsel, a stern woman in a tailored navy suit with a phone in hand. She glanced at Cameron coolly. "Mrs. Langston, this isn't a good time." Graham's voice rang out from inside, weary but firm. "Let her in." The attorney stepped aside. Cameron entered. Graham stood behind his desk, arms crossed, shoulders tense. Two men in dark suits sat nearby, notepads open, expressions unreadable. They rose without a word and exited, shutting the door behind them. For a moment, Cameron and Graham simply stared at each other. The residue of last night's fight hung thick in the air. His eyes flickered. Regret, concern, maybe even relief. "Cameron," he said, dragging a hand over his face. "I was going to call you as soon as this calmed down." Her rage reignited at the casual, dismissive tone. "Settled, Graham. You're under investigation by the SEC. This isn't some minor misstep. They're saying it's criminal. It's everywhere in the news." He exhaled sharply. "I can't go into details right now. It's an internal situation. The legal team says we should cooperate but stay quiet publicly. There are rumors about insider trading, yes, but it's all a misunderstanding. We're clearing it up." "A misunderstanding," Cameron repeated, her voice hollow. "Does this have anything to do with Juliana Chen and last night's dinner?" Graham flinched slightly at the mention. "Why would you say that?" "Because every financial outlet is speculating it already," she hissed. "Were you with her to discuss something illegal? Some kind of insider deal?" "Stop," he snapped, raising his hand. "I can't talk about her. Not here, not now, just trust me, I've got this under control." Cameron stared at him in disbelief. "Under control? Graham, your entire company is crawling with federal agents. I couldn't even reach Nina." "Nina was told to speak only with our lawyers," he cut in tightly. "She's in the legal conference room now. This is protocol." "Protocol," Cameron echoed, stunned. "How deep does this go? Because I'm not going to sit in our penthouse 8 months pregnant while you're possibly looking at prison time." I didn't break the law, he said quickly, but the sweat on his brow betrayed his panic. Juliana gave me some intel about a firm we were evaluating. She said it was solid, her own research. I thought it was legit. You acted on it? Cameron's voice dropped to a whisper, laced with dread. I repositioned some assets, Graham admitted. I didn't think it would be classified as insider knowledge. It wasn't presented like that. I had no idea the SEC would come knocking. Cameron felt the ground tilt beneath her. This wasn't just infidelity or lies, it was a potential federal crime. She stared at Graham, remembering the driven, captivating man she married and wondering if this broken figure standing in front of her had any part of that man left. What do you want from me? She asked finally. I need you to believe me, he said earnestly. I'm meeting Juliana again today to get clarity. If she misled me, then it's on her. My attorneys can build a defense around that. I didn't knowingly break any rules. You're meeting her again after last night? It's business, he insisted. I know how this looks, but I'm trying to protect our future. Just let me handle it. Please. Part of her wanted to scream, to walk away and never look back, to call her father, pack a suitcase, and disappear. But another part, the part carrying Graham's child, still clung to the hope that this could be fixed, that the man she loved wasn't entirely lost. So Cameron nodded once, a reluctant signal that for now she wouldn't walk away. Fine, Cameron said, her voice even but firm, but I'm not letting you go through this alone. I'm staying in the city. I'll help however I can. Graham exhaled, a wave of relief crossing his face. He reached for her hands, but she instinctively stepped back. I'll trust you, for now, she added, her voice trembling. But trust isn't bottomless. You've already broken it once. That afternoon, Cameron paced the penthouse restlessly. The SEC had allowed Graham to remain at his office for now, but under strict instructions to provide any requested documentation immediately. His communications were almost certainly monitored, and Juliana Chen had been officially listed as a person of interest. Cameron tried to stay calm. She set up a quiet corner with a throw blanket, turned on some gentle instrumental music, and focused on soothing the baby stirring within her. But each time she closed her eyes, she saw Graham in that private booth, his hand brushing Juliana's hair, the familiarity in their body language. The image seared itself into her thoughts, like a brand, undeniable and cruel. She replayed the scene until it blurred, trying to convince herself she'd imagined the tenderness, the intimacy. But no matter how many times she blinked it away, it returned, clear, merciless. She pressed her hand against her belly, as if trying to shield their unborn child from the betrayal leaking through her skin. How did we end up here? She whispered into the silence. Was I blind the whole time? A call from an unfamiliar number shattered her reflection. She answered, heart pounding. Hello, Mrs. Whitaker? A clipped professional woman's voice said. This is Caroline Patterson from the New York Daily Mirror. We're working on a piece involving Whitaker Ventures. Would you be willing to offer a statement? Cameron's mouth went dry. No comment, she said, ending the call quickly. Another call came 5 minutes later. Then another. Journalists were clearly trying to reach her from every outlet, sniffing around for a quote or a headline. Shaking, she turned off her phone completely. The silence that followed felt both like a relief and a trap, cutting her off from the noise but amplifying the war inside her head. She sat still for a moment, staring at the blank screen of her phone, wondering when exactly her life had shifted from predictable to tabloid fodder. She wasn't just betrayed. She was public property now, her grief commodified. The day dragged on. When Graham finally walked through the door after 8 p.m., he looked like a man unraveling, tie loosened, eyes rimmed red, jaw tense. Any progress? Cameron asked quietly. He nodded. Our legal team says there's no hard evidence yet. Just circumstantial stuff, allegations about some trades possibly linked to insider tips. But they're still digging. As for Juliana... He paused, unable to meet her gaze. We spoke. She insists she's being made a scapegoat, said she's flying back to Hong Kong tomorrow, claims the SEC can't touch her there. Cameron's stomach turned. So she's running, Graham shrugged. That's how it looks. I asked her to talk to my lawyers. She refused. Now she's ghosting me. My legal team's panicking. If she disappears, it'll make me look complicit, like I helped cover something up. Cameron studied him for a long beat. Are you still sleeping with her? His face flushed red. No, Cameron. I made a mistake. I let things go too far. But it wasn't real. Not for me. She wanted to believe him, needed to believe him, but the weight of suspicion bore down. Is that the truth? Or just what you need me to think? I'm not lying to you, he said, voice cracking. Juliana was business, maybe blurred lines, sure, but I never planned to leave you. Not for her. Her voice dropped into a pained whisper. How noble. The words left her mouth like glass, shimmering but sharp, cutting even as they escaped. Her hands trembled, clenched into fists, holding in the scream she didn't want to release. He stepped closer, hand trembling slightly. Cameron, if we can get through this, I'll change. I swear I will. I'll fix what I broke, just don't leave me now. Looking into his eyes, she saw shadows of the man she married, ambitious, flawed, but once full of dreams for a life together. And in that moment, a small, aching part of her wondered if holding on would cost her more than letting go. A part of her longed to reach back for that man, to believe he still existed somewhere beneath the wreckage. Hesitantly, she placed her hand on his cheek. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. For a brief moment, they simply existed, damaged but still connected. By the following morning, Cameron felt an urgent need for clarity. She made a phone call to the one person she knew she could trust, her father, Franklin Bellamy. Their relationship had its friction. He had never fully embraced Graham's brash climb from obscurity, but he was a rock in her life. Dad, she said softly as he answered. Things are bad. Graham's firm is under SEC investigation. There are rumors about insider trading. She heard his exhale on the other end. I saw the reports. Are you safe? I don't know, she admitted. There may have been someone else. I think he might have cheated. Everything feels like it's falling apart. His voice softened. Honey, right now, you need to take care of yourself and that baby. Stress isn't just hard on you, it's hard on them too. I know, she whispered. I just don't know what to do. Should I leave him? Franklin paused. I can't make that call for you. But listen to me, Cameron. Graham has always played with high stakes. It's what built his success, but it's also what could bring it crashing down. You need to think hard about whether you believe he can truly change. She closed her eyes. I understand. If you want to come home, your old room is waiting. Or I'll arrange one of the nearby condos. No pressure, but you won't face this alone. Tears welled in her eyes. Thanks, Dad. I'll think about it. After ending the call, Cameron sat quietly by the penthouse window, staring at the Manhattan skyline as sunlight spilled over the rooftops. Her memories spun like a reel, meeting Graham at a charity event her father had hosted, his magnetic smile as he spoke about defying the odds, the sweet little note he'd tucked into her coat asking her out for dinner. Where did that man go? Meanwhile, Graham's day was about to take a sharp turn. He was scheduled to appear for a voluntary interview at the SEC offices downtown. His legal counsel believed it would demonstrate cooperation. But an hour before he was due to leave, a text appeared from an unknown number. Meet me at the Park Regency Hotel, room T02. Urgent, Juliana. His pulse quickened. Why would Juliana contact him now, especially if she was supposedly flying out of the country? He showed the message to his attorney, Edward Langley, who frowned deeply. That's risky. She's under suspicion. Meeting her could look like you're coordinating stories. Graham furrowed his brow. But what if she has something? A document or a message, something that clears this up? If she can back up her tips, it could change everything. Langley shook his head. I won't forbid you, but understand, if the SEC finds out, they may treat it as collusion. Take a lawyer, or at least have a witness. No, Graham said. She might clam up if there's counsel present. I'll go alone, but I'll record the meeting. Langley's jaw tightened. Just be smart, and absolutely no promises, no cash, no favors. Anything that looks like a bribe could finish this. I get it, Graham replied. He typed a short response to Juliana. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Graham ended the call and instructed his driver to take him to the Park Regency. Unease crept over him like a cold sweat. Was this a sting operation? A trap orchestrated by the SEC? Or worse, blackmail? When he arrived at room 192, the door was slightly ajar. He knocked gently, classical music drifting through the gap. Juliana's voice rang out, soft and polished. Come in. Inside, the suite was elegant and immaculately staged, marble floors, velvet couches, a vase of fresh roses on the coffee table. Juliana stood near the window in a sleek black dress, her posture poised, her presence magnetic. She was every bit the enigmatic woman he remembered. "Don't be shy," she said smoothly. "We don't have much time." Graham stayed by the door. "Why did you ask me here?" Juliana motioned to the couch. "Sit down." He didn't budge. "I'm not here for small talk. Get to the point." Her smile was slow and tight. "I'm flying back to Hong Kong in a few hours. I wanted to make things right. I never intended for this to fall on you." Graham's jaw tensed. "You gave me illegal tips. That's exactly why I'm under fire." She narrowed her gaze. "Don't act like you were clueless. You're a savvy operator. You could have double-checked, but you didn't. You wanted results." He started to respond, but she cut him off. "Anyway, I came with a solution. I can sign a statement saying I misrepresented the information, that you acted in good faith, based on what I told you." Graham's breath caught. "You'd admit to misleading me?" Juliana gave a casual shrug. "I'll say whatever helps for the right price." His expression darkened. "How much?" She walked over to a small desk, picked up a folder, and held it up. "Inside you'll find emails, text transcripts, all curated to look like you were duped. I want 5 million. His eyes widened. 5 million? That's extortion, Juliana. She tilted her head. "Call it severance. After this, I'll be burned in every circle. Your contacts are off limits. I'll have to start over." Graham's head spun. 5 million was steep, but losing the company would be worse. Yet if he paid her, that would be considered bribing a witness. It could crush him legally. "No," he said, stepping back. "If I give you a dime, my legal team will walk. This could bury me." She scoffed. "Your lawyers won't matter when you're indicted." His voice rose. "So this was the setup? Use me for access, then sell me out?" Juliana's tone sharpened. "You used me too. Don't pretend otherwise." "I'm not paying," he said firmly. "If you really have evidence that helps, give it. Otherwise, I'm done." Her face turned to stone. "Think carefully, Graham. You're on the edge." He didn't reply. He opened the door and left, pulse thundering. She might twist the truth, frame him. He wasn't sure what scared him more, what she had, or what she might fabricate. Back at the Bellamy Equity office, Graham filled Langley in. The attorney paled. "She asked for money? That's bad. If this comes out and we haven't disclosed it, it's obstruction. We have to go to the SEC now, voluntarily." Graham groaned. "Let's just get ahead of it." Together they left for the SEC headquarters, where investigators were waiting. Charlotte, who had insisted on accompanying Graham for emotional support, sat quietly in a corner of the SEC conference room. She offered him a small, steady nod. Despite everything, she was there. The lead investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Francesca Morales, greeted them with a composed "Bellamy. We appreciate your cooperation. We have a few questions." Langley, Graham's lawyer, gave a clipped smile. "We'd like to go on record. Mr. Juliana Chang attempted to solicit money in exchange for exculpatory statements. Mr. Bellamy refused." Morales' interest sharpened. "That's a serious claim. Do you have proof?" Graham glanced at Langley and nodded. He'd recorded the conversation at the Park Regency. They handed over the audio file. Morales listened silently through headphones, her face unreadable. When she finished, she removed them slowly. "We'll have to authenticate this. But if legitimate, it strongly suggests Miss Chang attempted blackmail." She turned her eyes to Graham. "That does not clear you, Mr. Bellamy. Regardless of her intent, you're still accountable if insider information was used." "I understand," Graham said quietly. His voice barely rose above a whisper, thick with the weight of exhaustion and dread. Every word he uttered felt like walking a tightrope over the ruins of his life. What followed was a slow, excruciating interrogation. Morales asked about trades, calls, and every interaction with Juliana over the past several months. Graham answered carefully, often pausing to consult Langley. Occasionally, Charlotte offered brief clarifications, how Graham often worked late into the night, how he believed Juliana's information was credible research. Morales took notes without comment. Finally, after hours, they were excused. Langley informed them that a final decision from the SEC might take weeks, but they were not being charged, yet. Charlotte sighed quietly in relief. Graham's expression stayed grim. "We're not in the clear." The uncertainty gnawed at him, an invisible predator waiting for a single misstep. The financial world buzzed with news of the hearing. Rumors swirled that Juliana had fled overseas. Headlines screamed with drama: wife pregnant, mistress missing, empire teeters, and tech tycoon or ticking time bomb. Investors began pulling out. A partner company's publicly traded stock linked to Bellamy equity plunged. Graham spent every hour trying to stabilize the firm. He wrote dozens of emails, made endless calls, begging investors to stay calm. Some did. Many didn't. The board of directors called for an emergency meeting. Charlotte watched it unfold in horror. She wanted to support Graham. But more compromising photos of him and Juliana surfaced, laughing together at events, caught in intimate moments he had downplayed. The media ran with it, spinning their affair into a headline-grabbing saga. One night, Graham returned home late. He tossed his keys on the kitchen island with a snarl. Another investor's gone. The board's losing faith. Charlotte, who had been pacing with nerves, approached gently. "You need a statement," she said. "Address the investigation and Juliana, head on." Graham slammed his hand down. "I can't, Charlotte. The lawyers have made that clear. And if I mention Juliana now, it'll just fan the flames." His voice cracked with helplessness. For the first time, she saw the fear behind his fury. A man watching everything he built teeter on the edge of collapse. Charlotte kept her voice steady. "So your plan is to do nothing?" Charlotte asked, her voice flat. Graham looked drained. "Yes, for now, that's what my legal team recommends. Wait until the SEC completes their inquiry, then we respond." Charlotte nodded silently, feeling more isolated than ever. The tension inside their penthouse thickened each day, like invisible walls pressing in. Graham swung between bursts of manic energy and cold, stony silence, and Charlotte was left alone in the echo of her thoughts. A few days later, her father, Alexander Barnes, showed up unannounced. Graham was at the office. Charlotte welcomed him with quiet gratitude and offered tea. He studied her carefully, concern etched across his face. "You look completely worn out," he said gently. "I can't sleep," Charlotte admitted. "My mind keeps looping everything." Alexander placed a warm, steady hand over hers. "Come back with me, just for a while. Give yourself some space to think. Let Graham figure things out on his own." "I don't want to leave him," she said, torn. "You wouldn't be abandoning him," Alexander replied softly. "You're carrying a child, Charlotte. This stress, this environment, it's not good for you or the baby. You need calm, peace, not SEC agents and scandal headlines." Charlotte looked down, finally acknowledging how consumed she'd become with Graham's chaos. She barely considered her own well-being. After a long pause, she nodded. "You're right. Let me pack a bag." She scribbled a short note and left it on the kitchen counter. "I'm going to Dad's for a few days to rest. I hope you understand." She didn't expect a reply, and none came. The Barnes estate in Connecticut welcomed her with quiet comfort. Staff ensured she had nourishing meals, a peaceful suite, and space to breathe. Slowly, Charlotte's body began to relax, but her heart remained heavy. She watched the news closely. Bellamy equity was unraveling. Reports of investor exits, speculation of Graham's resignation if formally charged, it all painted a bleak picture. Then, one afternoon, her phone rang. Amanda Lynn, Graham's longtime assistant, was on the other end. "Mrs. Bellamy, I'm so sorry to call you directly, but something strange happened." Amanda's voice trembled with urgency. Charlotte gripped the phone tighter. "What is it?" "A man came to the office, Kyle Granger, an old colleague of Mr. Bellamy. He says he has documents that could exonerate Graham, but Graham hasn't really paid attention. Kyle believes Juliana Cheng was working with a rival firm to sabotage Bellamy equity, something about a long-standing grudge, personal." Charlotte's pulse quickened. Juliana never said anything like that. "I don't know the details," Amanda continued. "Kyle claims Sabrina falsified data and fed it to Graham, making it appear as insider information. He said her father lost everything years ago because of a deal Graham closed. Kyle's worried no one's listening because it sounds unbelievable, but he seemed sincere." Charlotte thought of Juliana's icy demeanor, the blackmail. Maybe she'd planned it all. Fed Graham poison disguised as opportunity, then vanished, leaving him to burn. "Amanda, can you connect me with Kyle?" "Of course. I'll text you his number." Charlotte called Kyle immediately. He explained that Juliana's father, Wei Cheng, once competed with Graham in a high-profile merger. Graham had outmaneuvered him, causing massive losses and humiliation back in China. Kyle believed Juliana had staged her relationship with Graham to exact revenge, entangling him in legal disaster through manipulated tips and covert data leaks. I have documents showing Juliana's father orchestrated the entire infiltration, Kyle said, and a phone recording where she brags about how easily she lured Graham into going along with her plans. Charlotte's emotions tangled, relief and fury rising simultaneously. If Kyle's evidence was legitimate, it could clear Graham's name. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" she asked. "I only found it a few days ago," Kyle replied. "I was digging through old servers and email accounts from side projects Graham and I used to run. We had a falling out, and I hadn't looked at that data in years. I never realized Juliana's manipulation was this deep, but I couldn't sit on this once I knew." "Thank you," Charlotte said sincerely. "Please get those files to Graham's legal team, and send a copy to me too." The next morning, Charlotte returned to the city. Her father urged her to stay in Connecticut longer, but she stood firm. "If this can help Graham, I need to be there." At Bellamy Equity, she found Graham hunched over a table piled with paperwork, his eyes red-rimmed, the room thick with tension. The board was fracturing, the media comparing him to infamous corporate criminals. The weight of it all was suffocating. She approached and placed her hand gently on his shoulder. Graham startled, then turned, his expression shifting from weariness to stunned gratitude. "You came back," he murmured. She nodded. "Kyle Granger, I spoke to him. He has evidence, a lot of it." Graham blinked. "Kyle? I haven't heard his name in years." Charlotte quickly explained what Kyle had told her. Hope flickered in Graham's face. If he can prove this, that Juliana manipulated everything, this could change the entire trajectory. "It already has," Charlotte said, "but we have to act fast, before she vanishes." Graham called an urgent meeting with Langley and the legal team. Kyle arrived, briefcase in hand, and laid out his findings. The documentation showed how Juliana had infiltrated Bellamy Equity, falsified research, and fed Graham misleading information. The crowning evidence: a recorded call where Juliana sneered, "Graham's so desperate for legacy, he never checks the sources. By the time the feds are done with him, he'll be ruined." Langley leaned back, visibly impressed. "This gives us a real defense. Graham may still be questioned on oversight, but criminal fraud? This turns the spotlight away from him." Graham looked overwhelmed, his voice raw as he turned to Charlotte. "I don't deserve your loyalty. I was careless. I let ambition blind me." Charlotte placed her hand over his. "Let's just fix what we can." With Kyle's evidence, the legal team approached the SEC. The response was swift. Francesca Morales interrogated Graham again, this time with renewed intensity. Over 2 days, the team verified the recordings, scrutinized Juliana's actions, and corroborated Kyle's data. Then the SEC released a formal update. The investigation would shift focus to Juliana Cheng and her affiliates. Graham would remain under evaluation for negligence, but the insider trading allegations were largely dropped. Media outlets exploded with the twist. Juliana painted as the calculating saboteur. Tabloids dubbed her the Mistress of Deceit. Public fascination pivoted. For Graham, the worst of the legal storm had begun to lift. He wasn't entirely exonerated. Civil penalties loomed and Bellamy Equity's image was severely tarnished, but it was no longer a career-ending disaster. Investors remained cautious, but at least the specter of prison no longer loomed. Throughout the turmoil, Charlotte stayed by Graham's side. Their personal relationship, however, remained tenuous. She had forgiven him enough to help clear his name, but the pain of his betrayal lingered. One quiet evening, after a long day filled with legal calls and damage control, they sat in the den of their penthouse. Graham poured himself a double scotch, offering Charlotte sparkling water. They drank in silence. "Thank you," he said eventually, "for staying, for finding Kyle, for everything." She nodded. "I did it for our baby, and maybe for the version of you I used to believe in." His face crumpled slightly at the words. She added softly, "Where do we go from here?" He finished his drink. "I don't know. I can't undo it. I failed you. I chased power until it consumed me." "And Juliana?" Charlotte interrupted, her voice tired. "Let's not talk about her again," she said. "I don't know what's next," she admitted. "But if there's any hope for us, it'll take honesty, therapy, and time." He closed his eyes, one tear slipping down his cheek. "I'll do whatever it takes." In the following weeks, Graham officially stepped aside as CEO of Bellamy Equity, appointing a senior partner to stabilize the company while he worked through the remaining legal matters. The board accepted his decision with relief. His presence had become polarizing. Meanwhile, Charlotte focused on preparing for motherhood. She invited Graham to doctor's appointments, and he came. They still kept emotional distance, but when they listened to the heartbeat or saw their baby on the ultrasound screen, something fragile tethered them together. Then, on a brisk November morning, Charlotte went into labor. Graham sped through traffic to the hospital, frantic and fearful. After hours of labor, they welcomed a baby boy, whom they named Nathaniel James Bellamy. Nathaniel for Graham's grandfather, and James for Charlotte's father. Holding their newborn son, both felt the weight of the past months lift slightly. Scandal, betrayal, disgrace, it all seemed distant in the presence of this tiny life. A second chance had arrived, swaddled in cotton and innocence. Epilogue. Within the year, the SEC concluded its investigation. Graham paid a substantial penalty for negligence and agreed to strict oversight conditions for any future ventures. Bellamy equity, though damaged, recovered slowly under new leadership. Graham shifted his focus to philanthropy, working behind the scenes, rebuilding credibility, and learning humility. Juliana Cheng never returned to the United States, reportedly sheltered by her father in Hong Kong. Rumors of further legal action continued to swirl around her, though none materialized publicly. As for Charlotte and Graham, they took the long road to healing. Counseling helped. So did hard conversations and quiet moments spent watching their son sleep. They rebuilt, slowly. Trust was no longer assumed, it was earned. They were no fairy tale. Life rarely is. But they were learning how to move forward. Together, changed, but not broken. But in the hush of their child's laughter, and the quiet resilience of recommitment, Graham and Charlotte Bellamy found something genuine, something worth fighting for. Though the headlines had once screamed betrayal and scandal, the final chapters of their story remained unwritten, holding space for redemption and the possibility of a different kind of happiness. Life had twisted in ways they never expected, testing every bond and belief. What began with heartbreak evolved into a high-stakes legal storm that nearly unraveled everything. And yet, amid disgrace and uncertainty, they uncovered a core of strength neither had fully known before. So that's it, dear friends. Our story has come to a close. But wait, you're still here, aren't you? If you've made it this far, something must have touched your heart in a way that words alone can't explain. Maybe it was the heartbreak, the moments of silence between two people once so close, or the quiet strength in the face of chaos. Whatever it was, you felt it. And that feeling matters. What we just experienced together wasn't just a tale of scandal and redemption. It was a reflection of real life. How easy it is to mess up, to lose sight of what's precious, and how hard, but healing, it can be to face the truth, own our flaws, and choose love, again and again. The ancient Stoics had a saying, the obstacle is the way. That means the pain, the heartbreak, the shame, it's not something to avoid. It's the very path to becoming better. Just like Everett and Camilla, or Graham and Cameron, we all make mistakes. We all have moments when we fall short of who we hope to be. But what defines us isn't the fall, it's how we rise. He who angers you conquers you, said Epictetus. And in this story, we saw that anger didn't win. Forgiveness, patience, and growth did. That's the real victory. So if you're going through something messy, painful, or quietly heartbreaking, remember, you're not alone. Healing isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's just showing up each day, choosing to stay, choosing to grow. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of love, of regret, of hope, then please like, share, and subscribe. It helps us keep telling the stories that matter, and it reminds us all that we're walking this imperfect, beautiful road together. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one.